Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Creating Wealth, and we have our amazing real estate, super amazing investor, Robert Allen in the house. How are you doing?
Excellent, Marjorie.
And today we're going to keep covering this topic of like getting a property and getting it all the way to closing, because people are loving this content, especially because they had so many fears about investing in properties right now, given the market that we're in. But thank you so much again for giving us that assurance that yes, there's no better time than today to actually start investing. So you mentioned that when you go through the evaluation process of a property, you like to see the numbers first. What numbers do you like to see when you are evaluating a property?
Well, there's two kinds of numbers that are really important. Well, actually, three kinds of numbers. The price is a number. And of course, you want to be able to buy something below the market price. And that's hard to do. And therefore, you want to find a property before it's entered the public space. You want to find a property where somebody is considering selling, but they haven't been approached by a realtor yet. Maybe they had a sudden emergency, and they've finally decided, I need to sell. This property is I'm behind on my payments. I need to sell, and you need to show up right at that moment. And that's another conversation we're going to have, not today, but let's assume that we have found that person before they've listed it. Because as soon as it becomes listed, what happens? That means everyone's eyes are on that one property. And everyone who is looking for real estate deals is going to see it show up in the multiple listing service with realtors, and everyone is going to want to write an offer on that property. That's why when a property immediately comes available, there's 6 or 8 offers on that property the very day it comes on the market. And that's when in a hot market that we've been experiencing, although that is going to decline. So obviously I want a property that's below the market. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of have to get an idea of what does a typical investor home look like. Now we've been talking about single family homes, but we can also talk about duplexes, 4plexes, 6plexes, 8plexes, mm-hmm. in that smaller price range area. But let's assume that we're starting with a beginning investor who wants to buy a single family home. Then the first rule is, what is the market? What do you think the market is for that property? And you can check on that very quickly. You can check with a title company that can give you a rough idea of what properties have been selling for. You can sign up for some online programs, online $50, $100 a month, where you get to evaluate all the properties in the United States. Real eFlow is one of those programs. Another one is called, I'll think of it here in a second, but it's how you evaluate, because some of these nationwide programs can tell you what's sold recently.
Right.
What property is it comparable? At what price? Mm-hmm. And really, how much money did they buy it for? And what money did they put into it? And all of this is publicly available information for less than $100 a month. Oh. And so I think for any real estate investor, they should be doing something like that. But anyway.
So that's the first number then.
That's the first number.
At the price.
Is it on the market or below the market? And then, of course, once you do make an offer, if other offers come in, then you have to evaluate, do I want to pay this extra price? So you need to know in advance, is it worth any extra competition? Because if it isn't, then you're going to bow out. Mm-hmm. You're just going to say, no, I'm not going to compete that way. You're not going to get caught up in the frenzy of FOMO, like fear of missing out, because that means you're speculating. Do not speculate. I would recommend that you don't play the retail game. No. Just don't. You just say to yourself right from the very beginning, I'm a wholesale investor. I'm not a retail investor. Therefore, if the price gets competed up, I don't want to play that game. And the best way to not play that game is to find the property before it gets into the public square. Gotcha. Then you may be the only person that is making an offer on it. So price is one number that we want to look at. The second number is what kind of mortgage would be available. Because if you're going to do a hard money loan, a hard money is where you have to qualify. And let's go down that road first, and then we'll go down an easier route. Ooh. Let's go down the hard route first, which is I got to qualify for a loan. What can I qualify for? Well, if I'm going to live in it, then I'm owner occupied. That means my down payment can be lower.
Right.
But it still means I have to have good credit. I have to have good income. I have to have a down payment, the 5-10%. And if you move into it, there are certain legal rules about how long you need to stay in it in order to say that you were owner occupied before you move out. So all of these are legal things you have to look at. Are you going to be owner occupied or are you going to be an investor?
Right.
If you're an investor,
that's going to be a little bit more
yeah,
pricey.
you're going to have to put up 20 to 25% as a down payment. And that means that's more money. Where are you going to get that money? Now, my specialty is nothing down.
And we love that.
Yeah, we've talked about it, and we'll go in more detail in another call and like, where do you raise the 25% if you don't have it? And that is all about the 50 nothing down techniques. Because if you don't have the money, somebody does. And you can negotiate with other people to bring them into the game with you, where they can partner with you. You can pay them extra interest, or you can pay them a percentage of the deal, yada, yada, yada. That's another, so let's assume that you've got the money. Okay, good. Congratulations.
That's the second number. We already got the mortgage.
I'm going to put the 25% down.
So what's the third number that we should be looking at?
Well, then what is the monthly payment going to be?
Cool.
Yeah, and what is and the interest rates are floating, so you want to make sure you've locked down an interest rate when you go in and lock it down, so you know what you're qualifying for. What is your credit rating? What is the interest rate that's current that day? How long will that last? So you can make your plans on it. And the real question, if you're going to stay in it, you know, well, that to be an owner occupied, then can you afford that monthly payment?
That's right.
If you're going to be an investor, then you have to say to yourself, what's the market for rental of this property? What would I be able to require get back as a rental?
What can I list it for, right?
So your interest rate, if it's 7%, does that give you too high of an interest payment to be able to qualify for enough money to rent it for? So the next number would be, what would be the potential positive or negative cash flow? Now you have to count into taxes and insurance, some possible problems with the fix-up from time to time.
Maybe HOA fees as well.
Yeah, maybe an HOA fee, exactly.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of give a rough example or a rough estimate of what your possible expenses would be, plus the gross rent that you'd bring in. Is it going to be a positive or a negative? And and the answer is, you don't want a negative cash flow. Why? Because that's a continuing down payment for you.
Oh yeah.
You have to continue to feed the alligator, as we say. And you don't want to. You
We
don't want
don't
a bunch of
want to feed the
alligators.
alligator. No.
Yeah, especially you don't want to have multiple alligators. You know, where you got 5 properties with heavy negative cash flows. And in some parts of the country, it's hard to buy a property with a positive cash flow. In other parts of the country, slam dunk.
Cash flow is amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the next number. Is it a positive or is it a negative cash flow?
Any other numbers that we should be looking at when we're evaluating a property, besides those ones?
Those are the fundamental ones.
Okay.
You know, the price and the positive or negative cash flow.
Gotcha.
Those are the ones that are really important to you, in my opinion. I do a little number system, which I've talked about in a previous podcast. I ask 5 questions. Each question I give a number to. Location, is it above market or below market? So if it's above the market, it's high, I give it a 1, a low number. If it's below the market, I give it a 3.
Cool.
So the higher the number, the better. So 1, 2, 3 is it on location. On condition of the property, is it going to take a lot of money to fix this thing up? So that's maybe another number we all need to look into. What will it cost to fix this thing up, to be able to put a tenant in?
Would it be worth it even to start investing into something like that?
Your property inspection person will tell you, this is what it's going to cost to make it kind of livable and maybe legal. So maybe that's a number that we need to look at, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, is it going to cost minor amount of money? Then I give it a high number, 3.
Right.
If it's going to cost a lot of money, I give it a 1.
Oh yeah.
If it's kind of like, okay, I give it a 2. So now I've got these 3 areas of analysis and 2 numbers, right? And finally, when it comes to what about the price? Let's see, I'll talk about location, I talk about condition, price. Is it above the market or below the market? Give it a 1, 2, or 3. Finally, 2 final numbers is, what about the financing?
That's right.
Is it going to be a hard financing where it's going to require lots of down payment, lots of credit checks, really hard to get the loan? It's just you're sweating bullets all the time to see whether it'll close. By the way, we've got to finish up that conversation on what the
that's
easy way
right.
to do it is. And so if it's hard, then I give it a 1. If it's like the seller would do some financing, and that makes it easier, I give it a 3.
Oh.
And finally, the final one is the seller. What is their motivation? Are they really pressured? They have a reason that they need to sell. The higher the need, the better the number. If they are, maybe there's a death in the family and they need to close quickly. Maybe they're moving in across country next week and they need to sell. What forces them and pushes them to be flexible? And so these 5 areas I do this quick numbering on the back of an envelope. Really, you don't need any financing special paperwork. 1 to 3. If it's 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, that's 15. Hey, that's good. If there's some 2s and some 3s and some 1s, if it scores 11 or less, 10 or less, I don't like it. I say I don't even want to look at it. I don't even want to go inspect it. It's
That's
the seller's probably not
Because you
going
would
to
be
sell it
losing
to
your
me.
time. That's true. So
But if it scores 11 or more, I want to go look at it.
And one of the things that you mentioned is that you first run the numbers before going on an inspection. Because I feel like once you run the numbers, you can go into the property knowing that there are a couple of problems that you may be encountering, but you already are budgeting them
Correct.
within your numbers.
Correct.
Kind of like having a cushioning in case that's something
It's a
were to
little
happen.
scoring system. It's a simple cheat sheet, really.
Right.
And so when I'm on the phone, I've got to make sure that I ask those 5 questions. So, Mr. Seller, what's the location? Mr. Seller, what's the condition? Mr. Seller, what about the price? What do you think the price should be? Mr. Seller, what do you need as a down payment? Would you be willing to
Carry
would you be
on
willing to
something.
carry any financing? Now let's
Yeah.
go down that route. Okay,
Ooh.
was that in a previous podcast? I can't remember. We had 2 ways of financing, the financing numbers. If we finance it with a hard loan, we need to know what is the positive and negative cash flow. If we finance with seller financing, now that's easier because 40% of all the properties in America have no mortgages on them. And some sellers are afraid to go get qualified for a loan because their credit isn't that good, because they are afraid to have these embarrassing questions asked of them. But what if nobody asked those embarrassing questions?
That's right. Because the seller is not going to know those
Exactly.
questions.
What if the seller is not a professional? They're not a bank. They're not a mortgage company. What if the seller really doesn't want cash? Now, how could that be? Why would a seller not want cash?
You never know. Sometimes they have another property that they're looking
They've already
at.
bought another property. They don't need the down payment, and they don't want to put their money in a bank at 1% interest. So you say to them, why don't you be the bank? Why don't you let me make you, and what's the interest rate? Today it's 5.75%. Let me pay you 6.25%. I'll pay you even more than the current market. So now you're giving them a concession. You give me a concession, you finance it, I get a concession. Now sometimes the seller has a mortgage on it with a non-assumption clause, meaning they're not supposed to sell it to somebody else.
Oh, no.
Without it triggering the non-assumption clause. So there
And
are,
what is that non-assumption clause like then? What does it state?
it says in the mortgage, you can't sell this property without letting the new buyer assume the loan so that we can pre-qualify the seller. In other words, the bank or the mortgage company.
The bank wants to sneak
They
out a
want
little
a better
bit
interest
and-
rate, frankly.
Oh, wow.
They want to refinance the property, really, is what they really want. And now there are ways around that by doing some land contracts. It's a little tricky. And so you have to, maybe we'll have another conversation about that.
Yeah, that's for
I'm not
sure.
going to go into that one today. How do you really buy a property where there is an existing mortgage? So let me give you an example. Let's suppose suppose the property is $300,000 and there's a $100,000 loan on it. Therefore, this mortgage has got to get paid off. But what if the seller is willing to accept a contract, meaning you write them a contract for $300,000 and you make them the monthly payment, and out of that payment that we give them, they make the payment to the existing bank.
Oh.
And therefore, they're responsible for making that underlying loan. There's some things you got to do to protect yourself there.
That's true.
But the bottom line is, you, without doing the traditional qualifying, can have the seller act as the bank. And therefore, every property has a situation like that. They're either free and clear, where there's no bank, or they're lots of equity, and there is a bank. And so there are some secret ways of succeeding where the seller is going to be much more lenient with you. One of my really successful investors who does big properties, big major properties, done lots of single family homes and lots of apartment buildings, lots of commercial property. But when he really launched himself into his business, he had declared bankruptcy.
Oh, wow.
So not only was his credit bad, it was horrible, the worst it could be.
Yeah.
And he was upfront. He said to the seller, I'm a young buck, I'm just getting started, had some financial challenges in the last recession. It was me and millions of other people. I'm good for it, but I got to let you know up front that when your attorney checks out my financials, they're going to see a bankruptcy in there. And it was recent. It was 2 months ago.
Oh, no.
But you can see I'm a go-getter, and you can see that I'm willing to give you the price you were asking for, which was a price that no one is willing to sell it to you at. Mm-hmm. But I'm willing to accept that. And I'm going to put sweat equity into it. I'm going to work hard. And he convinced the seller with a bankruptcy on his credit to a very large property.
Oh, wow.
Where he not only turned around and within 2 months made $1 million on that one deal. So what I'm trying to say to our listeners here, that don't listen to what the traditional retail world is telling you. The mortgage companies, the banks, and the realtors are the retail's game. They play a retail game, and they want you to qualify in a retail world. Mm-hmm. I'm a wholesale guy. I can tell you that when you find a highly motivated seller, all bets are off. Even a bad credit rating can be off.
That's right.
Even a low down payment can be off.
Mm-hmm.
One of the books that I've written is called The Challenge. And if you want that book for free, just go into the comments section, just type book in there, and I'll get you a free copy of it. It's a book about me going to an unemployment line and selecting people who had no cash, no credit, no job, no income, no down payment, no nothing.
And they still were successful.
And they were able to buy a property within 90 days and make quick cash and make $100,000 in the next 12 months. So I'm trying to tell you that my description to you is to give you hope, especially if you are without hope. And if you've been playing the game without the possibility of hope, I'm your hope guy.
That's for sure. And I find that amazing how you always give us that positive attitude. That's one of the things that most, let's say, real estate gurus, they don't focus on when they are going through the process of evaluating a property. Because even though you are going through the traditional way, which is you have to look at the numbers, then you have to look at the quality of the building and go through the contract and all of that. An important part of it is also mindset, that you need to have hope that you're going to find a deal, because you may be getting so many doors closed on your nose saying nope, I don't want your deal. Nope, I don't want your deal. But as long as you have that positive mindset that yes, you are going to find that one deal that is going to change your life, you're going to find it.
That's right.
And talking about finding a deal and getting into a contract, any last tips that you could give us for anyone that is listening out there and is trying to get into a contract for a property?
It's all about the numbers game. Talk about numbers. It's a numbers game, meaning you can't get discouraged after 10 no's. You can't get discouraged after 20. I made a bargain with somebody. One of my students was paying for one of my seminars. This was a few years ago, and it was $5,000 for the training. And he says, I only have $5,000 left. You're not going to take my last $5,000, are you? And I said, well, I don't guarantee my seminar. And he said, I need a guarantee. And I said, well, that's why you only have $5,000 left, because you always want a guarantee. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have the mindset of willing to go all in, you have to go all in. And he said, I'm not going to go all in unless you give me a guarantee. Oh, no. And so I gave him a guarantee. I said, you write 100 offers, you get 100 rejections, you show me the paperwork. You write 100 offers, I'll give you a guarantee. I'll give you your $5,000 back. Oh, wow. And he wrote 72 offers. Oof. And on the 71st offer, he got a yes and made his $5,000 back. And on his 72nd offer, he made $150,000 in cash in 60 days. So, you know, you got to. I'm going to give you the same 100 number. You know, go write 100 offers, because in one of my students also wrote 100 offers, and she got to like 57 or something like that. And one of the offers she written at the very beginning, her first offer she wrote that was rejected, actually came back to her months later and said, "I'll accept your offer now. Number 2 fell out."
Oof. Wow.
So anyway, it's a numbers game. Don't be discouraged.
True. That's right. And I mean, a little no is not going to hurt you. So thank you so much again, Robert. And thank you to our audience. So yeah, just go out there and write as many offers as you can. 100 offers, we're on it.
That's right.
We'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.